This is Guidance to Other Equipment to Purchase. Thank you for watching. I am Kevin England. Welcome to the lesson. This lesson is going to cover our suggestions for typical equipment that you will need for your beekeeping kit. We have classified them as essential, optional, and recommended. And at the end, we'll cover one piece of equipment that we suggest you opt out of. It's quite a bit to cover here, so let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with the essential equipment that we are requesting you order with your kit in conjunction with the program. It's time to review the other equipment that we've been talking about that you'll need for your beekeeping kit. As noted on the slide, they can be categorized into a few different types, and we're going to start with essential, which are the things that an everyday beekeeper needs. Adjunct equipment is something that we're going to recommend, but probably use throughout the program when we give you instructions on how to work your bees. And last but not least are the odds and ends that are optional. They fit into the category if you probably don't need them right away, but you will eventually need to get them, or we recommend that you have them in your kit. Before we delve in, we'll take a moment to say out loud that we're going to tell you to buy some things that have not been covered yet, and some will be fine with that and others will want more background. When I say covered yet, I mean we haven't instructed you how to use them. You're going to have to buy them on trust. You'll have to trust our guidance for now and believe that we're going to explain to you how these fit into the program. We'll come back to usage as we go along. A smoker is the first essential tool. They come in different features, different functions, with guards around them like the one shown, different quality baffles, and other design elements. Some are better quality than others in their materials and in their construction. Going back to the lesson presented just before this one about shopping, this is one place where inspecting a smoker in person is probably a good strategy if you can do it. When looking at the quality cues, look for a smoker that are made from heavy gauge metal and that have substantial metal cages like the one that's depicted. Another important feature in smoker design is the baffle design. Look for solid construction in the frame that holds the baffle together, and one that uses real leather as part of the baffle material. I'm going to state a preference here without an endorsement. The Dadant company has often been lauded as the gold standard for smoker offerings, but the truth is most of the big stores have caught up and provide really solid designs these days. One key consideration for purchasing a smoker rests with the size of the smoker. As you can tell by the photos on the screen, there are two sizes shown here, and they come in different size chambers. The top one is a conventional middle side, and I would call the lower one a taller form factor. The taller design holds more fuel, and as such is designed to burn for a longer period of time. Since it is likely that you only have one or two hives to start out, the middle one is probably the better place to start. The good news is they're not terribly expensive in the grand realm of all the things that you buy for beekeeping. And if you want to source a larger one, start out with the smaller one. You can probably build it into your schedule to get a big sized smoker if eventually that's the path you want to take. Hive tools are the other essential tool that every beekeeper needs. The marketplace offerings, well, there's a wide array, as you might glean from the image down on the bottom slide. The hive tool depicted at the top of this slide is the classic traditional shape hive tool design. We request that you buy at least one of those and suggest that it's probably best for you to get two. As to the recommendation, you will come to realize that in quite a few circumstances, this is going to benefit you by having a couple of them to work and manage your hives. The one in the photo is red over silver. You will find that in the marketplace They love to offer many different colors. The traditional color for these is bright yellow. The background on bright yellow is quite simple, and it's an important consideration for you. If you drop your yellow hive tool, it's easy to spot on the ground. You do not want to miss that hive tool that fell out of your kit while you were walking back to your house after coming out of the apiary. You only need to hit one of these once with your lawnmower to know how important it is to have a hive tool that stands out against the grass. When we explain to you how to inspect a hive, we're going to suggest how to do it with that style hive tool. As the slide suggests, we will require you to purchase one of these Varroa monitoring devices. And in time, we're going to explain to you how to use it, so please source one. If you're participating with an association that's facilitating in-person visits, they will bring one or at least tell you how to use the one that you purchased. We will provide instructions on how it's used later in the program, and our mite monitoring instructions in the lesson for mite monitoring call for this particular Easy Check device. Growing a newly installed colony to full size requires supplemental feeding to stimulate them. That's our instruction. We want you to get them to full growth, and stimulating gets faster. No. Growing a newly installed colony to full size, we're going to give you instructions for supplemental feeding to help that along. We're going to take some time to talk about feeders used in our upcoming instructions to you when you get started, but in the next few slides we're going to talk about the two feeder styles that we want you to purchase. The internal division board feeder is the first one. We ask you to purchase two of these feeders because we want you to start with two hives. You'll need one for each hive. The internal feeder depicted will be used right away when the bees are initially installed, so you need to make this purchase early. As the slide shows, be sure to buy ones that have an internal ladder design. Some offerings just have holes in the top or use smooth sides on those tubes that go down into the feeder. The internal design with a ladder helps the bees walk down and ensures they don't slip off and drown in the feeding liquid. This is a different style of feeder, and the second one that we request you to buy, and yes, you need two of these also. In time, when we instruct you how to feed the bees for growth, we'll tell you how these work in conjunction with the internal feeders from the last slide. Before we move on from feeders, this style of feeder requires a call out. This style of feeder used at the entrance of a hive is commonly referred to as a Boardman feeder. We do not recommend using them for feeding. As the slide says, it encourages an undesirable activity called robbing. Because it's a food source, other bees will come to the front entrance and attack the hive while fighting for the food there. As an aside, these happen to be an example of something that's often bundled with a pre-packaged starter kit, and that's why people end up having them. If you do find yourself in possession of one of these, you can use them for supplying water at the front entrance of the hive for the bees. Because it's only water and not food, it does not incite robbing, and water collecting bees will find it very convenient that they have water at their doorstep. So there is an alternative use for a Boardman feeder. Everyone should have a veil in their kit, and in reality, 2 at minimum is what we suggest. Even if you have a beekeeping jacket or suit with head protection, you should still have one of these in your kit. This is going to be covered in additional detail when we get to the lesson on protective gear. A proper beekeeper's kit requires a bee brush. There are a vast number of management tasks where a bee brush is used in taking care of bees. This makes them an essential piece of equipment in a new beekeeper's kit. There is one tip on the slide that I'm not going to cover in any detail here, but I shared it here so you have your first encounter with the tip. Flick, don't brush or sweep. When working with bees, it's really important to be organized. One way to think of a toolbox or equipment holder is everything in its place and every place has its thing. Carrying your tools into the yard, setting them down here and there is a recipe for disorganization. Plan to satisfy some way to organize your kit. Now, this is highly personal for a lot of different people, so we're not going to tell you exactly how to do it. We're just going to show you someone's example. As a side note, you probably noted that this particular beekeeper had a swarm collect on the side of his bucket while working in the apiary that day. Bare fences are a complete side consideration, and this particular slide's here for visibility. And we have a number of videos available on the website for employing bare fences, and we would suggest you watch one of those and understand the entire process. There will be additional resources listed at the bottom of this slide presentation on the website, and also we're going to offer a lesson later specifically about bare fences. A time will come when you need to close down the hives for overwintering. In advance of that period, do buy some form of mouse guard entrance reducer. The wooden one shown here is pretty traditional, and the metal one below has become quite customary. Either style is suitable, and you will need one for each hive. Of course, you cannot operate a smoker without fuel and some way to light it. We are partial to pine needles as a fuel, as they are one of the most customary choices for smoker fuel. Before you even get started, you can go out somewhere, look around for pine trees and collect the needles and get them dried out in anticipation of the season. Now, what we don't like are the pellet-style smoker fuels that are sold in some beekeeping catalogs. They're hard to light, they're hard to keep burning, and at least for us, we have found that sometimes they tend to cause a mess in your smoker over time. Incidentally, some out there will tell you that's nonsense. They use the pellets and it works fine for them. Yeah, okay. This is where we say, when in doubt, please follow our guidance. In time, if you want to try these out, you can figure that out. But in the beginning, we don't want to see you struggle. So as new beekeepers, please do not subject yourself to trial and error. You only struggle. As to lighters, typical stick lighters like the ones shown do a very good job at lighting smokers. We would like you to source this piece of equipment. As you can tell by the photo, frame hangers are used to temporarily hold frames that are extracted from the hive during inspections. It's pretty common for a beekeeper without one of these to lean their frames taken out of the hives against the hive on the ground. We're not really fond of that practice, as it becomes a problem when you inevitably kick it over, step on it, and when the bees crawl off onto the ground and you pick the frame up and they get stepped on. Spec one of these for your kit, and we will tell you how it's used when we teach you how to do hive inspections. You only need one of these. We're now entering into the realm of recommended equipment. If you followed our guidance about building your own frames, then a frame jig is highly recommended. It truly simplifies the job by holding the frames secure for fabrication, all 10 of them. There are plans that can be found for building one on the internet, and we'll look to see if we can find you a link to one. And you can find them for sale in most bee catalogs these days. A nucleus kit, as it says on the slide, there's so many reasons to have a nuke box. And we will talk about this on several occasions during the courseware over 2 years. Now, you don't need one for day one, but in time, we very much recommend that you buy at least one setup and prep it for use in your first year. And prep it for use means they come on painted like a typical hive, and you have to put it together during assembly. You have to paint it and everything else like a normal hive. While you're building your first kit, maybe you want to buy a couple of these and do it all in one shot. Once you have one, you're going to find several ways to use it in your beekeeping practice, we promise. There will be times when you are going to leverage the option to treat for varroa mite infestations using certain chemicals. It's imperative that you follow the safety instructions while applying treatments and protect yourself. As an example, some of the treatments are applied using a vaporized acid, and if you breathe them in, you risk burning your lungs permanently. Do not take the risk and put one of these on your shopping cart for when it is time to do mite treatments. There'll be lessons on the type of masks that are out there and the cartridges that go with them. You have to match the cartridge to the treatment style. We'll talk more about this in future lessons, but right now we're just telling you that you're going to need one of these if you plan to do certain treatment styles. We highly recommend that you mark your queens, and in time we'll tell you the benefits of why you want to mark them and how that helps you in your operation. As the slide notes, there are reasons to buy different colors. They typically signify how old your queen is. The colors We highly recommend that you mark your queens, and in time you will come to know the benefits of that and the methods for how to select a queen off of a frame and get it marked. As the slide notes, there are a number of reasons to buy a few different colors. The colors represent how old the queen is typically, and as with the respirator, we suggest you add this to your shopping list. Just about every beekeeper learns the value of some kind of yard cart to convey things back and forth. Some of the wagons Just about every beekeeper learns the value of some kind of yard cart to convey things back and forth to the apiary. Some use wagons, others use large garden-style yard carts. The choice can be these and anything in between. It's really personal preference, but we would suggest you think about this and figure out how you want to do it in your beekeeping operation. From here on in, we're going to go through a few suggestions that we keep in our kits, and we believe you would benefit from having them too. First one is a queen excluder device. Now these in tradition are truly meant to go between two boxes to keep a queen from passing from one to another. A very typical example is to restrict a queen from passing through the bottom box so that it does not lay eggs in the honey supers above. An unusual fact is they don't often cross that divide, the queens, which means that they're not used for that intended purposes, the queen excluder. Still, they are a very useful tool to have in your kit for a number of beginner beekeeping activities. You don't need one right away, but in time you may find it advantageous to have one or two of these in your kit, especially for the second year beekeeping activities. Drone brood frames were covered in the Langstroth Hive equipment pieces. In this one, we suggest that you wait until we get to the point of describing what they are, how to use them, and then you can make a decision if you're going to implement them into your program. To be clear, we're not going to talk about working these into the initial build out of your colony, so you'll have time to discover what they are and decide whether you're going to make that purchase. We made the recommendation earlier for two types of feeders, the internal feeder and the hive top feeder. As you can see by the photo, there are other alternatives. Our instructions explicitly use the two styles that we recommended, and in practice, you don't need these other styles. It is useful, however, to know that other styles exist, and in the case of the zip top bag, if you don't want to spend the money on the other feeders, we can understand if you want to give those a try. We'll cover these as some other forms can be employed successfully, but honestly, we would just prefer you use the instructions and go with the flow. While this is stated as a recommended item, we probably could argue that it should really be mandatory. There are just so many practical uses for having this type of kit or tape in your kit. While this is stated as a recommended item, we could probably argue that it should be mandatory. There are just so many practical uses for having this type of tape in your kit. Do yourself a favor, though, and avoid any offerings that are not 3M brand. We're pretty emphatic about that recommendation. It's our experience that other brands simply just don't work as well, and some of the cheaper ones will physically pull the paint off of your boxes. As with blue tape, this is something you'll find a large number of uses for, both hand cleaner and sanitizer. Interchangeably should be purchased with isopropyl alcohol. They're recommended for your beekeeping bucket, for cleaning tools, for cleaning your hands, for getting propolis off, and other reasons. We'll tell you about that as we go along. No kit's complete if it does not have a Sharpie, a few screwdrivers, a utility knife, and some other odds and ends that you'll probably hear us talk about as we go through the program that we haven't mentioned here. Now consider the recommended items we've covered so far and leave room for some others you may discover along the way. We are just about ready to close down this lesson, but there's one tool that we will take the time out to tell you to skip. Some beekeepers love these, and we do not. We find them awkward to work with, and we just don't recommend them. They're very tempting. You'll find a lot of gadgets in the beekeeping world, and we are huge fans of trying different things to see if they work. And we do try to see if they work. And really, it's about whether they add value or not. Frankly, we've tried one of these. We think it's awkward to work with. Yes, it does pull the frame out of the box, but then when you have it in your hand, it's hard to take whatever steps are next to work with that frame. They're hard to store in your kit, and we simply didn't like using it. Now again, beekeeper preference. If you had one of these in your kit, that's okay. One thing that we do find is some of these cause damage to your frames, and that's another reason to skip it, which would be our recommendation. That's it for now. There will come a time when we were going to recommend some other purchases, but this will do for the beginning of the course. This lesson covered beekeeping equipment. It did not cover protective equipment. We're going to have a dedicated lesson on that next. There is, of course, just to make sure that we have full disclosure and manage your expectation, more to buy. Think of this for an example. We did not talk about anything that has to do with extracting or bottling honey. We're going to get to more stuff at a later time, we promise. Just keep that in mind as you work your way through getting things up and running. So some required equipment, some suggested equipment, and some things to avoid. This closes out the presentation, and in our next lesson, we'll talk about the topics for buying protective gear. Following that, we'll get to building frames and fabricating and painting your beehives. If you have questions, you can ask at our next online session, or you can send an email to the address on the slide. If you're watching from YouTube, you can leave a comment below, and we'll just say thanks for watching, and we'll see you at the next lesson.